Bhagavad Gita as it is, text number 2, chapter is 18, the perfection of renunciation. Usually we don't like to hear about renunciation. Raise your hand if you like to hear about renunciation. Okay, I thought so. You're too smart. Usually renunciation scares us a little bit. So, Arjuna asks this question in the beginning of chapter 18. If you remember, if you were here, last week you had it? Whenever the last program was. Almighty Armed One, who's addressing Krishna, I wish to understand the purpose of tyāga and of the renounced order, sannyāsa, O killer of Keshi, master of the senses. In other words, he's seeing, is there a difference between tyāga and sannyāsa, or are they one and the same thing? So Krishna answers, śrī-bhagavān uvāca, kāmyānāṁ karmaṇāṁ nyāsaṁ sannyāsaṁ kavayo viduḥ, sarva-karma-phala-tyāgaṁ prāhus vicakṣaṇāḥ. That means the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, giving up activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyāsa. And giving up the results of all activities is what the wise call renunciation or tyāga. Actually, for the first maybe 9 or 10 or more verses of the chapter, this matter is clarified. So we'll see how far we get. But at least up in the first 12 verses, he talks about this topic. Let's see what Srila Prabhupada says in his purport. The performance of activities for results has to be given up. This is the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. But activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. This will be made clear in the next verses. In the Vedic literature, there are many prescriptions of methods for performing sacrifice for some particular purpose. There are certain sacrifices to perform to obtain a good son, or to attain elevation to the higher planets. But sacrifices prompted by desires should be stopped. However, sacrifice for the purification of one's heart, or for advancement in the spiritual science, should not be given up. We need to clarify some things here. First of all, when it says giving up activities that are based on material desire is what they call sannyāsa. This might be a little easier to understand if we use the Sanskrit terminology. He's talking about kamya karma. What is kamya karma? There are different kinds of karma. What does karma mean, first of all? Broadest definition of the term karma is action. But strictly speaking, real karma means dharma. And dharma falls into different categories. Because if it's not dharma, then what kind of action is it? What do we call it instead of karma? We call it vikarma, vigata, going in the wrong direction. Okay, so if we're talking about karma in the sense of dharma, punya is another name for it. And another name for papa, for vikarma is papa. So if we're talking about dharma then, there are a couple of ways that you can approach dharma. One is called kamya karma. If you want a son, then you can perform a putreshti homa, and this will give you a son. If you want to go to Svarga Loka, then you perform another kind of homa, and you will go to Svarga Loka. You don't have to do these things. You won't fall into hell if you don't do these things. Therefore, they're called kamya karma. Just like when you're in college, you can take core credits, and you can also take elective courses. So the kamya karma is a little bit like elective courses. They're not really necessary, but you can do it just to enrich yourself or for whatever reason you want to do it. Therefore, it's called kamya karma. It's based on kama, desire. So that's one kind of karma. And then nitya karma, or nyāsaṁ karma. is the karma that you perform. Now, when we say karma, remember, keep in mind, we're only talking about dharma now. We're not even going into vikarma, even though that's the dominant paradigm nowadays. The default, if you do not train yourself otherwise, is that you will be automatically put into the trajectory to commit sinful activity. All you have to do is be socialized in modern culture, and you will become a sinful rascal. Papi. This is called in Sanskrit, dvipada pashu. What does dvipada pashu mean? Two-legged animal. Srila Prabhupada used to say, the dogs and cats are running around on 4 legs, and we human beings are running around looking for the same things on 4 what? Wheels. But what are they looking for? They want to eat. The whole science of restaurants, the whole cultural phenomenon. I was talking with someone the other day on the East Coast, Indian. He said, I think that this restaurants thing is, this never was there in traditional Indian culture. Is it true? Never. This is a Western phenomenon. It is predicated on the assumption that human life is meant for sense gratification. If you make that assumption, then restaurant is very necessary. Therefore, we have a plethora of restaurants all the way up and down Royal Lane. We were watching as we were coming up here. So many restaurants. And I won't even mention the things that they eat in those restaurants. But eating is one of the activities that we have in common with the animals. What else do we do that animals also do? We mate. And what else do we do? We sleep. And what else do we do? We fight. We fight. Now, we sophisticate these processes considerably. Like I said, we're not running around on 4 legs, we're running around on 4 wheels. We're eating in a revolving restaurant on top of a 30-story building. We're sophisticating the activities in so many ways, but we're not really doing anything other than what the animals do. After all, if you think about it, where are we now? We're in Texas. It's hard for me to keep track. I'm moving around so much. In California, if you go to the Bay Area, people in the Bay Area of California, they love beavers. They will do anything to protect the beavers because they appreciate that beavers play an important part of the ecosystem, and they are very sophisticated developers, actually, these beavers. They build very sophisticated dam projects. It's not just Bhakra Dam or, we have dam politics also. The D-A-M, not D-A-M-N. But that's another matter altogether. The point is that animals are able to do these things also. And from their perspective, it's just as sophisticated as our endeavors are. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. We're talking about fighting now. We don't call it fighting. What do we call it? Asset protection. Securities. Right? That's why you have a security cam every 10 feet in America, because everyone's a criminal. And we'll see what India is going to do in the near future, especially when they get Aadhaar cards. Now they're taking everyone's biometric data. And the government is going to change in a few years, but your biometric data is not going to change. Something to think about if you live in India. Because you can't open an account now in India unless you're using the Aadhaar card. So it's basically forced police state. And the whole country is going to Singapore paradigm. Anyway, so this is all extensions and combinations and permutations of the defense mechanism, the fighting propensity that we share with animals. But dharmasya hina pashubhisamana. Without dharma, then a human being is really no better than an animal. And this is the subject of these opening verses of chapter 18. It's been discussed already. Acharyas commenting on this chapter of Bhagavad Gita point out for us, in case we haven't noticed, that the chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita really isn't offering anything new. It's just recapitulating so many things that have already gone before it. It's kind of like you have 3 Vedas plus 1 Veda. The Atharva Veda is just a compendium of quotes from other Vedas. So chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita is a little bit like that. So this dharma has already been discussed before, but we're talking about the divisions of dharma. Let's get back to the topic here. You have kamya karma, which is not obligatory, and you have nyāsaṁ karma, which you have to do. If you don't do this nyāsaṁ karma, then you're not strictly speaking a human being. Technically speaking, you're not a human being. So this is really the demarcation. It's not enough to be a biologically correct human being, capable of reproducing with another biologically correct human being. That's not the definition of humanity in our Shastras. This is the point to be noted first. So kamya karma is not necessary. You won't incur any sin if you neglect that. It's quite feasible if you want. You can remain brahmachari for life, for example. You can take sannyas. And the definition of sannyas here is that he gives up anything that is kamya karma. There is a subtle distinction between sannyas and tyāga. You can be a tyāgi without being a sannyasi. Because the definition of tyāga instead is that you give up only the fruits of activities. Krishna is going to discuss this in the coming verses. In fact, I'll just skip ahead. You can study it in depth later. But he says, some declare that all kinds of fruitive activities should be given up as faulty. Who says this? The Sankhya philosophers, the impersonalists, the Mayavadis. They try to stop all activity. Okay? Do you think that's feasible? It's not feasible for you. And it's not feasible for me either. Maybe it's feasible for someone, but generally it doesn't work. You can't sit still even for a moment. Krishna already said this. Where? Chapter 3. Inactive, you can't even maintain yourself. You can't pay your bills. So how are you going to maintain? You have to stay busy. Therefore, the others say that other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. Who says this? The Mimamsakas, the Karmis. Karmi means real Karmis. Dharmi. Those who are interested in elevation. Those who are interested in shreyas. What is the difference between shreyas and prayas? These are two terms we find in the Upanishads. What does it mean? Shreyas. Sometimes we name our kids shreyas. The ultimate super excellent human attainment is called shreyas. It may not be immediately appealing, but in the long term, it is the best thing, highest thing, most noble thing, most elevating thing. That is shreyas. And prayas, on the other hand, means it may not work in the long term, but in the short term, it's immediately appealing, and everybody likes it more for that reason, because we're tuned into what our senses demand. So prayas is always a very strong influence, but real super excellence means shreyas. And the hallmark of South Asian civilization, by which I mean paramparagat bharatiya samskriti, that is shreyas. And it doesn't matter whether you're Hindu or whether you're Sikh or even a Buddhist or whatever, Jain even, the primary concern is shreyas. And Krishna says at the end of chapter 16, when he's talking about what? What is the topic of chapter 16?
Divine.
Yes, divine qualities and demoniac qualities. 3-4 verses he talks about daivi gunas, and the rest of the chapter he talks about the demoniac qualities. Just to give you a hint, what's more relevant for most of us. We have a strong tendency, because of attachment to the process of material life, and very strong attraction to the prayas. Therefore we tend to become demoniac, because prayas things make you basically demoniac, and shreyas things basically make you godly. Okay? So, when we're talking about elevation to shreyas, and we're by doing dharma, we have this kamya karma as one option, another karma as nyāsaṁ karma. Now nyāsaṁ karma again is in two categories. You have your nitya karmas. Those are things you have to do every day. What's one of those? You have to take a bath every day. When do you take your bath every day? Before dawn. If you don't take your bath every day, according to Ayurveda, what happens? All the pollution within, all the toxins in your body get recirculated and distributed and absorbed into your cells. That's where cancer comes from. Just let it go long enough. So what to speak of sinful reactions for not doing your duty? Because this is, after all, this is an nitya karma. You have to do it. In Vrindavan, even today, when people, they're already up because they rise early. The first time they see the sun in the morning, what do? Namo Narayanaya, Surya Narayana. He's a representative of the sun, a representative of Narayana, Surya. This is pious life. We should bathe in flowing rivers, because just like we should drink spring water. Why spring water? Why not tap water? Well, tap water you all know, you're smart people. Why not any other kind of bottled water? Because there's no pran there. When the water is no longer flowing, talk about dam politics. This is the problem. Everybody know this Chitko movement in Uttaranchal? This is the point. You know, you're actually killing the river. Yamuna River was actually killed 20 years ago, according to the UN. This is the findings. By whatever criteria they use, I don't know, but they declared the Yamuna a dead river. Because 15 years ago, when Dr. David Haberman wrote the book about the Yamuna, River of Love in an Age of Pollution. It's a very good book, I recommend it. He's very favorable to Krishna consciousness, although he's not an ISKCON devotee. So he pointed out in his book that even at that time, some 15 or 20 years ago, the level of carcinogenic pollutants in the Yamuna River exceeded government standards by 200%. The government allows, that actually there should not be any pollution, but the government allows some pollution because it's understood in India everybody cheats. So it was that carcinogenic 15 years ago. Śrī-bhagavān Goswami, the chief priest of the Radharaman temple in Vrindavan, he had to announce one day to Dr. Haberman that today I've broken my tradition. Today I've broken my family line. 500 years we're living here in Vrindavan, bathing in the Yamuna every day. Today I could not do it anymore because the Yamuna is that polluted. There's one Kandilwala, Pustakwala, Purana Bazaar mein, Vrindavan mein. और उन्होंने कहा कि 30 सालों से पहले Yamuna की स्थिति थी कि you could throw a coin into the Yamuna and you could watch it go all the way to the bottom. This is only 3 decades ago. That means it's not a very old, it's a new problem. It means it can be rectified if we want to. You see? But the people who are polluting the Yamuna are not the people who are praying to the Yamuna every day. This is the point that Dr. Haberman makes. He's not a devotee. Well, he's a devotee of sorts. But this is the point of his book. If people were conscious of the situation of the Yamuna, they would not treat the Yamuna this way. Vallabhacharya, the famous Vaishnavacharya, his system of philosophy looks at all human experience in terms of 3 levels that are very well-known categories in the Śrīmad-Bhagavatam. Adhibhautik, Adhi-daivik, and Adhi-atmik. What does that mean? The physical plane, the religious plane, and the spiritual plane, we can say. So, people who are in gross material consciousness, they just see water, and when they see water, they calculate how to use it for their own sense gratification. This is basically animal vision. Just like a dog will come, and when he sees a tulsi plant, he will lift his leg and do what dogs do. This is animal consciousness. So a human being who does the same thing to the river Yamuna is not really much different than the kāmyānāṁ that Krishna came and chastised 5,000 years ago. The purpose is the same because the consciousness is the same. Animal consciousness, demoniac consciousness, mundane consciousness. We see only water, and we calculate, okay, dams, electricity, so many, adi. On the Adhidaivic platform, if we're a little bit more advanced, we can understand. This is Yamuna, this is a sacred river. I can purify myself. I can perform so many of my nitya karmas, if I'm concerned about nitya karmas. Nowadays, less and less people even know what is a nitya karma. And you can't blame it all on Congress, although that's what they do nowadays. Now that Congress is 6 feet under for a long time to come, I would think. Anyway, Adhidaivic vision tells us that this is a goddess. We should worship her. And we see gods and goddesses everywhere if we're conscious, if we're educated in the Shastras. Like I said, people see the sun and they don't just think, oh, it's going to be a hot one today. That is Adhidaivic consciousness again, you see? Instead they say, Namo Narayanaya. Thank you for giving life. Ashesha Teja. Yes, what is it? Yat Chakshuresha Savita Sakala Grahanam. Sakala Grahanam Raja. He is the king of all the planets, the source of all life in this world. 3 times a day, those who are twice initiated chant their Sandhya Vandanam and worship the sun through the Gayatri Mantra. Because we all depend on the sun. Spiritually, the sun is also representing Narayan. We already mentioned this. So this is Adhidaivic consciousness. This person is less inclined to mistreat or abuse or pollute the Yamuna. And Adhyatmic consciousness is even more advanced than that, because in Adhyatmic consciousness we see she is the most dear consort of Lord Krishna in his Vrindavan pastimes. She is surging with joy out of Yamunotri, coming very forcefully out of the side of the mountain in the Himalayas. Why? One of the Vaishnava acharyas writes, because she's so eager to get to Vrindavan to see Lord Krishna. She wants to join him in his pastimes. So many things we hear about Yamuna and Krishna, how close they are. So a devotee, somebody whose consciousness is adhyatmic, spiritual, he will never think to mistreat the Yamuna. Rupa Goswami has written a very beautiful prayer, 8 prayers in glorification of the Yamuna. And at the end of each prayer he says, Mam punatu sarvadaravinda bandhu nandini. O daughter of the friend of the lotuses. Who is the friend of the lotus? Ravi. Kyonki. When the sun comes up, the lotuses bloom, therefore they're happy, they're friends. When the sun goes down, they close up. Sankuchita, Hojai. So, she's the daughter of the sun god. Who is her brother? Yamaraj. We discussed this on Sunday, maybe some of you heard. So, Mam Punata, please purify me. And then he says, Bhratur antakasya pattanebhi abhibhati harini. You take away the prospect of any calamity of having to meet with your brother in his place, you see. And prekshiyati papinobhi papa sindhutarini. Even a very sinful person, just by seeing Yamuna Devi, he becomes free of all his sins. Prekshiyati papinopi papa sindhutarini. Mira madhuri phiratyashesha chitta bandhini. Millions of people are delighted when they see the Yamuna, if they're pious, you see. Mam punati ityadi. So, in this way, he has 8 prayers. All of them are very beautiful. What else does he say? He says, Ramyathira Rambhamana Gokadamba Bhushita. She is decorated with so many lowing cows on her banks. What is a lowing cow? What does it mean? Rambhamana. Still you hear this noise in Vrindavan. In America, you don't hear it. And in places like, I'm sorry to say, Noida, Gurgaon, they're shooing out all the cows. They're not shooing them out, they're selling them. And who's selling them? Hindus are selling them, not just Muslims. And you know where they're selling them? This is the misdirected civilization. Mad. Nunam pramatta kurate vikarma yet indriya pritaya aprinoti. Rishabhadev says in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, a person who is cemented into this bodily concept of life will not hesitate to do any sinful thing to meet the demands of the senses. Indriya tripti. to please the senses. We become the servants of the senses. Therefore, such a person is called Godasa. And a person who can control this and focus on Shreyas and do at least adhidaivic things, if not adhyatmic things, that person is called Goswami. You see? Go means senses also. Go also means cows. So why are the senses compared to cows? I can tell you why. I went to Sri-Nadwara once, many, many years ago. And for a small sum, you can buy a big basket full of Mahaprasadam. So my godbrother and I, we sat down in there was a patio with some small chairs and tables. So we were going to take this Mahaprasadam. And before we knew it, somehow or other, the table just exploded and everything flew everywhere. We didn't know what happened. Finally, when we figured it out, there was a cow there with her nose all the way into this basket, just snarfing up everything. Within seconds, the whole thing was completely quaffed, obliterated. This is why the senses are called go. They don't have any restraint, they don't have any consideration. Go. Alright, so Go Kadamba Bhujita. Groups of cows, lowing cows, they decorate her banks. Divigandha Bhakadamba Pushparaji Rushita. And the fragrance of so many flowers is wafting through the air there. What is it over here? Her riplets, he says, they're as if offering obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who is walking along the banks. After he walks in the bank of the Yamuna, the waves come and wash those footprints, because she wants to touch his feet. You see? This is devotional consciousness. So, all right, enough said about that. We should take our bath early in the morning. We should perform sacrifice and charity and austerity. These three things Krishna mentions how many times in Bhagavad Gita? At least 3 times. And he says, verbatim, he says, yajna dana tapaschaiva pavanani manishinaha. The sacrifice, charity, and austerity purify even the great souls. He says that twice, including in the coming verse. 2-3 verses ahead he says the same thing. So this is niyatam karma. This is nitya karma. Things that we have to do every day. We should never give them up, even if we are self-realized, even if we are pious, even if we are assured a place in Svargaloka, even if all of our desires are fulfilled. To be a human being, you have to do this. And then there's naimitika karma as well. Naimitika means you do it every once in a while. Just like samskaras. We have so many samskaras that we do. When the children are young, we put the money in front of them and we put the Bhagavatam in front of them and see what they're going to do with it, right? Or when we teach them how to read, we draw the letters with using their fingers and the rice, all these things. This is called naimitika karma. These things are important even if we're devotees, and they're important even if we're perfect human beings, because at least they set an example. Yet acharati shreshthas tat tat eve tarojanaha. Especially those who are brahmanas. It's not just having a 2 paisa janoi that makes you a brahmana. You have to actually act. Guna karma vibhagasha. Krishna says, Chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagasha. It's not janma karma vibhagasha, it's guna karma vibhagasha. You can take birth of a high court judge, but that doesn't mean you're a high court judge until you get the training. You see? So janmana jayate shudra. Everybody is by default, especially in this Kali Yuga, Kalav Shudra Sambhala. Everybody is born a Shudra. Sanskarat to bhaved dvija. You can become a twice born by samskara. This is the importance. Samskara means what? When we print a book, what do we call it? Prathama samskarana, dvitiya samskarana. To samskarana kya hai? Iska matlab kya hai? Samskarana. Impression. Printing means impression. what the activities that you perform, they leave an impression in your mind. Not just your mind. Because antahkarana is more than the mind. It means your mind, your intellect, and your ego, all three of them. These are purified. Whether you perceive it now or not, it doesn't matter. The impression is there. And even better than that, when we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Saltamapi yasya dharmasya trayate. Even a little bit of these kinds of potent practices, they do so much for us. Otherwise, what is it? If your head is full of television, or Indian Express, or whatever else it is that we put into our consciousness, then where are we going? And what is it worth? Think about the difference between Shreyas and Preyas. So therefore Krishna advises these, you'll see in the coming verses he will, I don't want to spoil the plot here, but he will say that my final opinion, matam uttamam, mama matam uttamam, he says, is that you should not give these things up. These Sanskritic things should not be given up, because look at the derivation. We have the word kri, which means to do something. Therefore we get karma, right? And karma, in this broad sense, it includes vikarma or dharma, either one. And then you put the samyak karma, the pratyaya you put in front of it, then it becomes samskrit. Samskara means the ritual performance that purifies you. Samskarana is the process of refinement, cultural refinement. Samskriti is the effect of everybody doing that cultural refinement. Samskrita is the language that we speak, as opposed to prakrita. Prakrita means you've just let it grow wild like weeds in your front lawn, if you never mow your front lawn. This is what some people do in the human form of life. Their minds look like a front lawn that hasn't been mowed in 2 years, except that they go for 50 years like that. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Cheto darpana marjanam. What does that mean? Cheto darpana marjanam. It's like a mirror. You have to wipe a mirror in order to get a clear reflection. What happens if you don't wipe your mirror for a few weeks? It's very dusty. What happens if you leave it for a few years? What happens if you have a mirror in your attic and you don't even know it's there? You take it down one day and you don't even know it's a mirror because it's so covered with dust. This can happen to you. There are people in this planet right now who don't even believe in God because the mirror is that dirty. There's no reflection at all. It just doesn't register. We all have strong desires. We're all here chasing them. Okay. You have to do something to maintain your position. Otherwise you lose it. And it takes one generation of neglect and you wipe out thousands and thousands of years of cumulative wisdom, culture, refinement of society. Just one generation, and it might as well have never existed. You look at someone like Vijay Mallya, and you would never believe that he comes from the same place as Shukadeva Goswami. You see? So therefore Krishna says, Natyajyam iti me matam. Don't ever give these things up. Sacrifice. What is the main sacrifice that we do in this Kali Yuga? Harinama Sankirtana. Yajñai Sankirtana prayer yajanti hi sumedhasa. Srimad Bhagavatam says, sumedhasa, the really smart ones in Kali Yuga, they do this Sankirtana Yajna. Dana is giving in charity. Tapa, Yajna Dana Tapaschaiva. These are the common denominators that we find in all things dharmic. And it doesn't matter what sect you belong to or what path you're following. I go to Tiruchendur. Anybody here from Tamil Nadu, South? Tiruchendur. Famous Skanda temple is there. So the family that I stay with, they're actually priests in the temple there of Skanda. So he was telling me when we chant Achaman, when we say Achaman in the temple, how do we do it? As Vaishnavas, we say Om Keshavaya Namah, Om Narayanaya Namah, Om Madhavaya Namah. So he told me we say Om Keshavaya Namah, Om Narayanaya Namaha, Om Madhavaya Namaha. Koi bhi fark nahi. So, or similarly, even if we're worshipping, you know, every time of twice a year that Namastasya, 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 Namo Namaha. We may be worshipping whoever for whatever reason, but at the end, what do they say when the homa is there? Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. You see? So, this is the point. All these practices, they all purify the heart, and they're ultimately meant to bring us to the point of devotional service. So therefore, the intelligent person takes the devotional service straight away. And we do this in this Kali Yuga by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So there's more that Krishna will explain about this. He explains about both kamya karma and nyāsaṁ karmas. And he points out that you can have these things in the three modes of material nature, and they're a little bit tweaked. When you get them in tamoguna, then it comes out a little funny. And when you get it in rajoguna, it comes out a little bit disturbing. And when you get it in sattvaguna, then it's elevated. Urdhvam gacchandi sattvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasaha, jaghane guna vrittistha, adho gacchandi tamasa. Again, I was in Tiruchendur. So he took me to one of his relatives' house, and they had, every house in Tiruchendur has this altar in the same place, and they have a big diya in the same place. And so I saw these little deities are there on the altar. So I asked, do you have Gopal also? And the lady said, yes, we have Gopal. And I said, I don't see him, where is he? And she came and she looked, oh. So then she thought, wait 1 minute. So she went and dug through the closet. And she couldn't find him. So I said, okay, wait a minute, you know. You've got a nice shiny flat screen over here, prominently displayed front and center in the living room. And you know, all these deities are stuffed in the corner here, and they're looking a little dusty, and you can't even find Gopal. So, you know, where does that lead? Latest Bhagavas from Bollywood, you're filling your brain every day. Well, where are you going to go? Yam yam bhavi svanam bhavam tyajantyante kalevaram. When you give up your body, whatever you've accumulated through this life of so many experiences, that's where you're going. Therefore, Krishna says, Manmana, Palamad Bhakto, Madhyaji Mam Namasku. Think about me. Be a devotee. Bow down. Worship me. Simple things. Then Ante Narayana Smriti. At the end of life, when the big door slams shut, you can't make any choices at that point. You can't change your trajectory. It's going to be set in stone at that point. Do it now. Jal balaga tana mein tapana vyapay tabalaga kari hari seva. Ek madhyakalin kavi ne kaha aisa. While you can. In Seattle, when I was there, the devotees printed out these cards we distribute when we go for Nagar Sankirtan. So it gives a Maha Mantra, and then it says, please chant this mantra while you can. Just to give a little hint. The human life is a life of opportunity, and human life is a life that is concerned with dharma. So, make your choice. Yate chati tathaku, as Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Make your choice. But think very carefully after having studied this conversation of Bhagavad Gita. This is just one verse. There are so many more to come. I think maybe we can stop now. But if anybody has any questions or any comments, we can discuss anything further. Abhisaraj Prabhu.
So there have been this almost this surge of activities which are related to charity, and you will see someone giving 1,000 rupees to a rickshaw wala or something like that, and the rickshaw wala has tears in his eyes. And you see that going around a lot, and people. I've seen a lot of people taking that as the real representation of dharma. To some extent, yes, that is
sentimental
performance of sacrifice, sentimental performance of charity, sentimental performance of so many different things. And it is difficult to convey that there is a little bit more that that has to be before it becomes a dharmic activity as compared to
That's right.
a karma-kandic activity.
We have to be discriminate. Human beings need to be discriminating. Discrimination is a bad word in modern society, but actually it means vivek, and vivek is a good guna to have, to know what to do and what not to do. Krishna says in the end of chapter 16, tasmat shastram pramanam te karya vijanataha. You should know what to do and what not to do on the basis of shastra pramana. And achariti atmanaha shreyas, same word is there. You should act in such a way. Achariti means more than just acting, it means you should set the example, no? Such that you are elevated and others are elevated as well. Now, regarding charity in particular, we've already been in chapter 17, I assume, many of us here, so this is going to be a review, but it never hurts. He says, Datavyamidya danam diyate anupakarine deshe kale chapatre chatad danam satvikam smritam. This is text 20 of chapter 17. Charity given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. Purport. In the Vedic literature, charity is given to a person engaged in spiritual activities. That's recommended. There is no recommendation for giving charity indiscriminately. Spiritual perfection is always a consideration. Therefore, charity is recommended to be given at a place of pilgrimage and at a lunar or solar eclipse, or at the end of the month, or to a qualified Brahmin or a Vaishnava, or in temples. Such charities should be given without any consideration of return. Charity to the poor is sometimes given out of compassion, but if a poor man is not worth giving charity to, then there is no spiritual advancement. In other words, indiscriminate charity is not recommended in the Vedic literature. Okay, so this is sattvic charity. Let's go on, because Krishna goes on. But charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with a desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. I'm not giving my big donation unless you guarantee that my name is going to be prominently displayed on the plaque. You see? We see this all the time. Yatu pratipakarattham phalam uddishya vapunaha diyate chapar krishnam taddanam rajasam smritam. Or adeshakale yaddanam apatrebhyashcha diyate asakritam avajñātam tat tamasam udahitam. And charity performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, or without proper attention and respect, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Is this helpful?
Yes.
We have only to open Bhagavad-gītā. There's a joke about this. इसका title हिंदी में क्या है? Bhagavad-gītā क्या? यथारूप. अन्यथारूप नहीं. यथारूप. So, Bhagavad-gītā as it is means as it is. Just leave it shrink wrapped on the shelf. I've seen this many times. You can tell it, and nobody's ever opened it. That's not going to help you. You're going to die before you read the thing. And then what is the use of having it? I mean, it's always some use. It's auspicious. But, the point is to open this thing. We talk about honey. You can take photos of it, you can write a research report about it, you can interview people about it, you can, so much. Open the bottle and taste it, bus. It's so simple. So Bhagavad-gītā is meant for reading. If we read Bhagavad-gītā, kinchidadhita ganga jala lavekarnikapita sakritapi yena murari samarcha kriyate yasya yamena na charja. What does charja mean? You may have to have an uncomfortable interview with Yamaraj at the time of death. But if you've studied Bhagavad Gita even a little bit, if you've taken a little Ganga Jal on your tongue, if you have nicely tried to worship Murari even once, then you don't have to worry about that. You see? So don't take it that I read Bhagavad Gita once. Actually, we have to read every day. Nityam. Nityam. And then we grow. We become enlightened. We see things differently. We see with knowledge. And it helps us. It's so nice. Bhagavad Gita. Yes, please.
So we just talked about text 20, chapter 17.
Yeah, that's right. I just quoted that.
So charity. But if a poor man is not worth giving charity to, I would think everybody is worth it, isn't it? How do you define someone?
Yeah, that's kind of ambiguous, isn't it? You know what? One time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his disciples were walking along, and they found some beggars. You know, they always line up outside the temples. So his disciples they didn't give any charity. One man, you know, sometimes the lepers are there, they're missing some limbs or something. So they were thinking, well, this will be tanasik dana, no, if we give. So he said, okay, but that may be, but like, where's your heart? You know, you should be a little compassionate also. Here's what I recommend about this. You give someone prasadam, especially here in America, because these people on the street corners, you know, they're going to go and buy drugs with it, they're going to go and buy alcohol with it. So give them something that's beneficial for them. Give them prasadam. I live in India, I know. Beggars sometimes, especially in big cities, more in big cities, less in the country, more in big cities. If you give them some prasadam, they won't take it. They only want money so that they can go and buy the sharab. Sarkari teka. So a worthy person means, you know, you discriminate. Is he going to hurt himself with this?
That's what they mean by not worthy.
Especially if you're from Punjab. Those who are in Punjabis, they understand. You give money to anybody in Punjab, it's going to heroin. That's the bottom line.
But Prabhuji, like in all like dhams, and most of the time we see people, those who are miserable, or like they come to the dhams and then they have no other means other than begging.
Yeah.
And as you said, you go to temple, see the line of people.
And this is an old tradition,
right.
And it seems to be respected. At least it's acquiesced.
So as a person, we don't have capacity to take care of all of them. And if you start giving one,
that's right. Yeah.
You end up like.
You know what I do? Radha Govinda Mandir man. The guy sits there and changes money. He's got a pile of 300-400 coins. So you just give him. And then you just, but nowadays, what is the price of worth? Krishna? So, you know, you have to give somebody at least 10 rupees. You're all NRIs, you can afford that. But, you know, be careful. Be careful. Because, you know, even in the Dham, there are what one of my godbrothers called seasonal parasites. They know exactly when the festivals are happening in which tirtha. So they have a regular circuit. And they just follow the whole thing around. Chitrakoot, this time of year will be good. Vrindavan, you can get money this time of year. So you have to be careful. If you live there long enough, then you get to be able to see who's who and what's happening. But this is again vivek. You have to use your discrimination. That's always advised. Does this satisfy your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it does, and the reason I think it kind of took the discussion is that as devotees sometimes we fail to recognize, as you mentioned, that there is the heart part of it. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea that now from a mental standpoint I understand 1720 or I understand 85, and then I say, well, I'm not giving and then I'm hoarding tons of cash in my 401k, and that's not appropriate either. So the question really is, what worthy people in the Kali Yuga have to come by, and Is it better to rather than not give?
Another thing you can do is you can give in charity directly to reputable institutions that are helping these people, that are feeding people, that like that. I mean, because then it's. I mean, in India, it's always likely that funds are going to be used, no matter where you get it to.
So, is that part of nitya karma? Is this as Krishna says, these shouldn't be stopped. It shouldn't be stopped. So is this?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I have a paramparagat answer for that. So I'm not sure I can answer that question. But I do have that one anecdote, which seems to suggest at least that, we should not be callous. When someone's clearly suffering, should not be callous. I think that was the point that he was making. Because, what is the point of chanting Hare Krishna if your heart doesn't soften? Ek diwar par Vrindavan mein ek doha likha hua hai ki. What does he say? Prema bina hari nahi mile, koti kare upachar. Nama japai dino prema ke hiyan hai sanchar. That's the point. Our heart should change. We should. Compassion is a natural qualification of any Vaishnava, but we want to avoid foolish compassion that is abused. That's the point. Therefore, this is also something that is emphasized, I think. Why does Krishna say this and not something else? Is that okay? That's maybe the best I can do for now. I'll think about it and we can discuss later. Anybody else have any questions or any comments? Okay. Jose.
Is Tulsi, one of the 8 million correlations of life?
Tulsi?
Yeah.
Well, Tulsi is a special. Tulsi is only a devotee of Krishna. There's no conditioned soul can take birth as Tulsi. So in that respect, you could say she's in a transcendental category. You can't take birth as Tulsi. Tulsi to Tulsi hai. Is that okay? But you can get a lot of mercy by worshipping Tulsi and worshipping Yamuna also. These are very dear devotees, Vrindavan devotees of Lord Krishna. They can give you bhakti. We say Vrindayai, Tulasai, Devyai, Priyayai, Keshavasya. Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi, Satyavate Namo Namah. She is Krishna Bhakti Prada. She gives Krishna Bhakti. And so does Yamuna. So does Vrajadevi. All these goddesses of Vrindavan, we need their mercy, and we can get in. Is that okay? Yes?
How do we, being here in US, we can serve Tulsi Maharani in a form of plant
Yes.
that's accessible, but how can we serve Yamuna Maharani?
There are nowadays some organizations that are working very hard to pressure the government to reduce the pollution of the Yamuna. That is a very great need. That's something that I could recommend because I've seen the Yamuna. Let me tell you, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I went to Brahmanda Ghat. 30, 40 years ago, we had a movie of Srila Prabhupada when he went to Brahmanda Ghat. And he didn't want to take bath there because it was cold water, but his disciples were playing in the water and having so much fun, and they convinced him. So he went and took a bath in Yamuna, and he's splashing and he's dipping 3 times. So, this is only a few decades ago. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I went to Yamuna at the same place, the very same spot that Srila Prabhupada had been. And I saw a 2-foot-high blanket of soap suds from this bank all the way across the river. And then I looked upstream as far as I could see, and it extended upstream as far as I could see. I looked downstream, and it extended downstream as far as I could see. The entire river was covered with 2 feet of soap suds. Firpi, I cleared away the soap suds and I took out a handful of water, and the water was black and viscous. You see my point? So this is a very substantial way to serve Tulsi, because look how she's being abused. Can you kill a goddess? But the UN said that she's dead, by some standards at least. A devotee group is, UN has some insight into that. So this is a very worthy cause, I think, if you want to serve the Yamuna. Otherwise, the ISKCON GBC also, several years back, when they took note of this condition, they gave out a directive to all ISKCON centers and devotees that raise awareness of this issue, glorify Yamuna, speak about Yamuna, research through the Shastras about Yamuna, raise awareness like this. And that will purify our hearts. It will also purify the society, and the effect of that will be that Yamuna is purified as well, at least on the level in which she's being polluted. Is that okay? Or jab Vrindavan jaye, so you can bring back a little Yamuna water and worship, but don't forget to take care of her. The problem with Hindus is that we worship rivers, but we pollute them at the same time. It's like we like to worship saints, but we don't like to become saints. So, we have to do something. We were talking about the word bhakti the other day. How does Prabhupada translate the word bhakti? Transcendental, loving service. This is like a set jargon that you find throughout Srila Prabhupada's books. Transcendental, loving service. And each of those, it's much easier just to say devotion. But devotion is meaningless in modern society. I have devotion for the light. I have devotion for so many things. This translation that Srila Prabhupada gives quite a bit of the time for the word bhakti is significant because, first of all, transcendental. That adjective suggests that this devotional service is rendered on a liberated platform, which is something that Krishna confirms in chapter 18. Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kamshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakti labhate. Loving means that your heart is invested in this. This is a personal relationship. This is the personality of Godhead, not just some impersonal force. His name is Krishna. He likes some things. He doesn't like other things. We have to do things a certain way for Him. And we should be purifying our hearts such that we can reestablish our now severed relationship. Loving. And service means there's a practical component. You have to do something. You see? Something active. So this is what we always have to remember. Is that okay? Jayumane. Anything else? Okay, so then we'll stop here. Give me instructions. What should we do?
This is, before we start, I'd really like to thank the host for such a wonderful program. Really like to thank Mukunda Datta Prabhu for taking the time to come. He's very, very well versed. And as part of the editorial team for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust,
Yes.
which means that the books of, is the Satsandarbhas, are you working?
Yeah, Bhagavad Sandarbha, Avi, and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu after this, full translation with commentaries.
Working on that. For that we study not only the grammatical parts of the language, but also the contextual aspects of it with respect to our particular sampradaya. And to translate Jiva Goswami's works is, right now it's one of the highest levels of understanding philosophy, but to bring it in a way that is applicable to each and every one of us. So it's a wonderful service that he's been rendering in Vrindavan. So we're very, very thankful for him to be able to come here. We hope that you can keep connected with him in any ways that you can serve him. So thank you again. It is very rare to get an opportunity to meet someone who has dedicated his life completely to the service of Srila Prabhupada, to the devotees, and to the dissemination of authentic literature throughout the world.
Prabhuji, can we have Narsingha?
Narsingha. Hare